Nero and Sporus, a tragedy of absolute power. Imagine yourself walking down the stone-paved streets of ancient Rome in the summer of 67 AD. The markets are bustling, the cries of merchants blend with the sound of horses' hooves, when suddenly the crowd parts, and you see something that makes your blood run cold. There, in the very heart of the Roman Forum, strides the emperor himself, Nero. Beside him, draped in silks and glittering with jewels, walks his new wife. To the casual eye, she is beautiful, delicate, regal. But whispers ripple through the crowd because everyone knows the horrifying truth. This woman is not who she appears to be. She was once a boy named Sporus, and what Nero did to him is among the most disturbing acts of psychological and physical abuse recorded in human history. The tale of Sporus is not just another anecdote about Roman decadence. It is a story about how absolute power can twist love into obsession, grief into madness, and a human being into a living doll, forced to perform a role they never chose. Nero, from golden promise to darkness. When Nero ascended the throne at the age of 16, he was not yet a monster. To many Romans, he seemed like the dawn of a golden age. He lowered taxes, funded games and spectacles, and even entertained the public with his own theatrical performances. The young emperor appeared generous, approachable, even idealistic. But absolute power corrodes. Over time, Nero grew isolated, paranoid, and untethered from reality. No one dared contradict him. Every desire became law. And at the center of his unraveling was one woman, Poppaea Sabina. Poppaea was no ordinary beauty. She was ambitious, clever, politically sharp. Compared to Nero's first wife, the quiet and dutiful Octavia, Poppaea was fire itself, confident, commanding, intoxicating. Nero fell for her completely, divorcing Octavia to marry her, shocking Rome's elite. From then on, his passion curdled into possession. He smothered Poppaea with jewels, statues, paintings, and guards to monitor her every move. He worshipped her, but he also controlled her, demanding total submission. And yet Poppaea was not a woman who bowed easily. She criticized him, teased him, challenged him in ways no one else dared. In 65 AD, during a domestic quarrel, sources disagree whether about chariot races, his performances, or political disputes, Nero, in a fit of rage, struck or kicked Poppaea. She was pregnant. The blow killed both her and the unborn child. In that single moment, Nero destroyed the one person he truly loved. Ancient writers describe him collapsing in grief, weeping over her body, ordering doctors to revive her, speaking to her corpse as though she could still hear him. He refused to cremate her body, as Roman custom demanded, instead embalming her, entombing her in splendor, and declaring her divine. But grief did not bring Nero clarity. Instead, it shattered his sanity. And into that void stepped an innocent boy named Sporus. Sporus enters the nightmare. Sporus was likely around 14 or 15, born into slavery within the imperial household but freed as a child. He had been educated for administrative duties and, by Roman standards, occupied a privileged position. But privilege in the palace was fragile. One lived and died by the emperor's whims. What drew Nero's attention was not Sporus' talents, but his face. Multiple sources say the boy bore a striking resemblance to Poppaea, his eyes, his delicate features, his bone structure. To Nero, already half mad with grief, this was not coincidence. It was providence. Here was his lost wife, reborn. There was, of course, one problem: Sporus was male. But for an emperor who fancied himself divine, gender was no obstacle. Nero ordered something chilling. Sporus would be castrated, surgically altered to resemble a woman. Imagine the terror of that command. Ancient surgery was crude and brutal, with little anesthesia, high risk of infection, and agonizing recovery. Sporus likely screamed, restrained by guards, while physicians performed the irreversible mutilation. Survival was uncertain. But Sporus lived. From that day on, he ceased to exist as himself. Nero renamed him Sabina, after Poppaea, and set about reconstructing him into the mirror image of the dead empress. The transformation. Sporus was moved into special quarters, given silks and jewels once owned by Poppaea, and trained relentlessly to perform femininity. Seamstresses crafted gowns to hide his boyish frame. Jewelers refashioned Poppaea's ornaments for his use. Cosmetic tutors taught him to widen his eyes with kohl, paint his cheeks with rouge, soften his features with powders. Hairdressers curled and styled his hair daily in elaborate aristocratic fashions. Even his gestures and voice were drilled into him. Tutors instructed him in how to sit, how to step, how to move his hands with ladylike delicacy. Voice coaches taught him to speak in a higher tone, to mimic the mannerisms of Roman women. And above all, Sporus was forced to play the part of Poppaea herself. Nero would reminisce about their life together, recounting memories of his dead wife, and Sporus had to respond as though he remembered them too. Every mirror became a cruel reminder. The face staring back was no longer his own. He was trapped in an identity not of his choosing, condemned to live as the ghost of a woman he had never met. The wedding of horror. Then came the most shocking event of all. In the spring of 67 AD, Nero announced that he would marry Sporus in a full imperial wedding. It was no secret rite. It was staged with all the pomp of a legitimate Roman marriage. The palace glittered with flowers and torches. Musicians played hymns. Nobles presented gifts. Sporus, dressed in bridal gown and veil, stood beside Nero as vows were exchanged, hands joined, bread broken, contracts signed. The guests clapped and smiled, knowing that hesitation could cost their lives. Beneath the forced joy hung an atmosphere of dread. Everyone present understood they were witnessing something grotesque. The Emperor of Rome marrying a mutilated teenage boy in the guise of his dead wife. From then on, Sporus lived as empress. He had his own staff, his own carriage, his own income. He sat beside Nero at banquets and accompanied him in public. Yet, this was luxury as prison. Every word, every glance was a performance, and any mistake could mean death. Nero, meanwhile, seemed convinced. He addressed Sporus only as Sabina, reminisced about their supposed past, and demanded the court sustain the illusion. For Sporus, life became a nightmare stage play with no curtain call. The fall of Nero. By 68 AD, Rome could endure no more. Nero's extravagance, neglect, and madness drove governors and generals into open rebellion. Even the Praetorian Guard abandoned him. Declared an enemy of the state, Nero fled the city with a handful of loyalists, including Sporus, the unwilling empress. In a villa outside Rome, as enemies closed in, Nero vacillated between escape and theatrics. At last, facing capture, he chose suicide. In his final moments, he still called upon Poppaea's name. Sporus, the substitute wife, was forced to watch the emperor who had destroyed his life perish by his own hand. Passed from hand to hand. For Sporus, Nero's death was no liberation. Instead, he became a prize, a living relic of the fallen emperor. Successive power seekers. Nymphidius Sabinus, Otho, Vitellius, claimed him, each forcing him to continue playing the role of Poppaea. He was never free of the disguise. It was under Vitellius that Sporus faced his final degradation. The emperor planned to use him in the arena, forcing him to reenact the myth of Persephone's rape, public humiliation before tens of thousands of spectators. The final choice. Confronted with this last indignity, Sporus made the only decision that was truly his own. Rather than endure another violation, he took his own life, likely by poison, sometime in 69 AD. He was not yet 20 years old. Legacy of a living doll. The ancient historians who recorded his story focus mostly on Nero's excesses, treating Sporus as a symbol of imperial decadence rather than as a human being. But behind their moralizing lies a devastating reality. A boy stripped of his identity, forced into the role of a dead woman, denied autonomy until his final breath. What makes Sporus' story haunting is not only the cruelty inflicted upon him, but also the resilience hidden in his final act. In choosing death, he reclaimed the one thing denied to him throughout his short adult life, the right to decide his own fate. Across 2,000 years, his story echoes as a warning. Empires rise and fall, but the human cost of unchecked power remains the same. Behind the marble statues and imperial grandeur are lives broken, silenced, erased. And sometimes, as in the case of Sporus, all that survives is a shadowy reminder that even in history's darkest corners, the struggle for selfhood and dignity endures.